Let's say, hypothetically, the rest of the districts rebelled against your capital. You end up winning the war by putting the 12 districts in their place and completely annihilating the 13th district. Well, to the best of your knowledge, forcing the rebel scum to sign the Treaty of Treason. And now that everything is going so great, how do you keep the districts in check so they don't do any more of those pesky rebellions? Well, the answer would be reminding the defeated districts about the power of the capital, and that any resistance would be pointless and result in unnecessary casualties. Many punishments were put into place, but the Hunger Games, a brutal event where a bunch of tributes fight to the death or starve to death, would have to be the one to take the cake. So I dedicated 3 months of my life to give you a comprehensive guide to the Hunger Games, going over the entire process of everything while also giving you a little history lesson here and there. So keep in mind that there's going to be spoilers for the entire series, including the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Also, I timestamped the videos so you can kill my watch time by skipping to the parts that you're most interested in, whether that would be whether that be the training days, the Gamemakers, the Quarter Quell, and so on. This guy right here is named Dean Casca Highbottom, also known as Highbottom. He supposedly came up with the Hunger Games when he was in his young 20s when in university. Except wait a minute, it wasn't just him. Remember when I said I was gonna spoil stuff for you? Well, Highbottom was a former student in Dr. Gull's class, and for the final project in their class, he was paired with his best friend Crassus Snow, also known as President Snow's dad. The assignment was to create a punishment for one's enemies so extreme that they would never be allowed to forget how they wronged you. Highbottom claimed that he was a good puzzle solver, and like all good creations, he had to come up with something absurdly simple at its core, which was the Hunger Games. The evilest impulse cleverly packaged into a sporting event, an entertainment. Highbottom was below the influence during the conceptualization of the Hunger Games, and Crassus assured him that this really bad idea would remain a private joke between the two of them. But without his permission, Crassus took the idea to Dr. Gull. It was supposed to be theoretical. But after the war, Dr. Gull pulled out the proposal and then introduced all of Panem to the architect of the Hunger Games, Highbottom. I mean, he was pretty shocked when they just went ahead and did it, to the point where he pulls a Haymitch and finds other ways to deal with the grief. Let's start with the reaping. This is easily the happiest day for everyone in the 12 defeated districts. Every year on July 4th, the pageant begins, as everyone dresses up in nicer outfits than they normally wear, dressing up in clothing that is joyfully named reaping clothes. Everyone from ages 12 through 18 all line up in the town square for the public reaping. Most businesses close down for the day, and school is obviously out, in penance for their uprising and blah 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 blah. Each district shall offer up one boy and one girl that are gonna have to be handed over to the custody of the capital, and then transferred to a big old arena where they're gonna have to fight to the death until one victor remains. It's not a good time. The names you ask are picked at random and drawn from a raffle. Let's say you turn 12. You're now 12. So on your 12th birthday, you're gonna be eligible for the reaping day. Your name is gonna go into this big old pool of other eligible potential tributes one time, and then every single year that you get older, it's always going to be adding one additional entry. So when you're 13, you have 2 entries, and when you're 18, you have 7. Because, you know, lucky number 7. But it's actually not that simple. Having your name in once a year would be ideal. I mean, not having your name in there at all would be ideal, but you get the point. Having your name in there once is never going to be the case. Like our modern day society, the reaping system is meant to work against you if you don't have, what was that thing that you need? Oh yeah, money. People like Katniss have the luxury of being able to hunt because her dad taught her how to use a bow and arrow, so she sneaks past the electrical fence that no one is supposed to pass through, so she can go into the wilderness to catch animals and feed herself and her family. Although she's not supposed to be doing that because the capital made stuff like poaching illegal. So if you're ever caught pulling a Katniss, there's gonna be severe punishment. But if you're an average person in a place like District 12 of all places, the odds are not going to be in your favor when it comes to starving. So they have Tessera, which is a form of food rationing from the capital. It supplies a year's worth of grain and oil for one person, which sounds great, but there's a catch. Accepting this food ration from the capital is gonna put your name in that raffle a few more times. People tend to avoid pulling a Gale who is trying to take care of his family, and by doing so, his name was put into the pool 42 times by the time of the 74th reaping.
How many times was your name in today? 42.
The capital really likes making people in debt to them, because being in debt as a citizen of the capital was historically a ticket to becoming a peacekeeper, and that would come with a 20-year commitment to some random place in the districts. Regardless, let's say that, I don't know, let's make up a random scenario where the name of your 12-year-old sister Prim gets picked from the raffle.
Primrose Everdeen.
Well, there's no need to worry, because you can take her place by volunteering as tribute.
I volunteer as tribute.
Rarely anyone ever does this in the districts because they're a bunch of cowards. Traditionally, after the male and female tributes are called to the stage, the announcer would then ask if anyone would want to volunteer. So Katniss really did expedite the process. However, the career tributes will volunteer on their own, with no need for a prim. The career tributes come from districts 1, 2, and 4, where they train their entire lives in a special academy till they're 18. Even though training for the games before the games is against the rules. But whatever. In their districts, volunteering is treated like competing in the Olympics or something, as they see the games as less of a death sentence and more of an honor, a great service that they get to carry out for their district. It's almost like a special rite of passage for them. The ones who train in the academy are almost guaranteed to win every year, thus helping the capital contain the spark.
Contain it.
After the reaping, a lot of districts celebrate that their children have been spared one more year, but the two families that have children in the games, they will definitely retreat into their homes and pull the shades and prepare for the emotional toll that they're about to experience having to watch their son or daughter most likely stop existing in the games. However, families of the tributes will be treated with kindness and support by the people in their town, at times even being given extra food. It's the same kind of reaping time kindness that allowed Gale to trade a single squirrel for this fine-looking loaf of bread from Peeta's dad's bakery. Because Peeta's dad, along with everyone else, just feels more sentimental around the time of the Hunger Games, especially on Reaping Day. Before the 10th Hunger Games, they would transfer the tribute in livestock cars while keeping them handcuffed. After their arrival, they would be housed in the stables of the Peacekeepers' horses, and then they would just be poured into the arena the morning after. But then things were changing, obviously, for the 10th Hunger Games. After exiting a train, they weren't stored in the stables anymore. No, they graduated to the zoo, specifically the monkey house. A very blatant metaphor for how the citizens of the capital view the people from the districts. Over time, the whole way that they treat the tributes really did evolve from that. In fact, it evolved into a week of luxury and stardom. The first day and a half of this very magical week is really just spent on the train ride getting over to the capital, which is apparently located in what used to be the Rockies. You'd think it would be an unpleasant train ride, mainly because they just said goodbye to their family for what is probably going to be the last time, but it's actually not that bad. They're able to indulge in luxury from the moment they step onto the train. They got private bedrooms now, private bathrooms, an abundance of clothing and food, but mainly food. Food is like food is definitely the best part, but they got to take a break from overindulging themselves in order to watch the reruns of the reapings that happened at every single district that day. So this is where a lot of tributes, we'll see if any other tributes are like crying a bunch and appear weak, because then they know that the crybabies are going to be the easiest targets to go for in the game. This is why Megs, Finnick's mentor, tries telling Finnick to pay attention to the cameras and to not publicly display how much he cares about her, because then the other tributes are going to pick up on this, and then they're going to realize, oh, this is his weakness. Each pair of tributes is given a mentor and a stylist, as well as an escort/advisor, like Effie. They're all given an Effie. The mentors were first introduced during the 10th Hunger Games, when Dr. Volumnia Gall, the head game maker and mastermind behind the Capitol's experimental weapons division, decided that 24 of the Academy's best and brightest seniors are to mentor their own tribute. The issue was that no one was interested in watching a bunch of kids fight in the Hunger Games, so the Capitol wanted to introduce a round of interviews in 5 minutes to present each tribute to Panem. The mentors were there to help add ideas to the games, but they were also there to make their tribute more likable so that the audience had someone to root for. This idea of mentors evolved over time to where mentors would just be previous victors from the same district. The mentor is meant to be the tribute's lifeline, the one responsible for helping you get sponsors, and could very well be the difference between life and death. So much to talk about, but we should probably go over sponsors first. Well, what the heck are sponsors? Am I right? Like, what are those? Well, before we talk about sponsors, we're actually going to talk about today's sponsor. No, I'm just kidding. Back in the day, specifically like 65 years before the 75th Hunger Games, Snow, with the supposed help of his classmates, had the idea of sending food into the arena, as he was wanting to keep his tribute, Lucy Gray, alive, and living, because she and all the other tributes were starving before the games even began. So Snow had the idea to develop the whole sponsorship thing after he watched Janice feed the other tributes at the monkey cage. Remember like 5 seconds ago when I mentioned sponsors? A panel would review and determine the value of every item that would be sent into the games. Then a citizen from the capital who is not directly related to the games could pay to send a tribute a life-saving package in the arena. To give the citizens more of an incentive to be a sponsor and buy the tribute stuff, Snow introduced the idea of a second panel to run a system that would officially allow capital citizens to place bets. Placing large bets is going to give people a lot of motivation to sponsor a tribute, or sometimes like the super rich people will just sponsor tributes because they want bragging rights if they correctly pick the winner. By the time of the 75th Hunger Games, thousands, and I mean thousands of capital citizens would place their bets on who they thought was going to win. This type of government-controlled betting system expanded to the districts. In the books, District 11 does something unheard of and sends a gift of seed-filled bread to Katniss after Rue's death. Me personally, I prefer the riot in the film version over the loaf of bread in the book, because to me it seems like more of an appropriate response to Rue's death. Plus, during the scene where everyone puts up the three-finger salute, and then James Newton Howard's song Rue's Farewell reaches its peak, and it's just, oh my gosh, I just get chills every time. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked again. The point is that districts can pool their money together in order to send items into the arena. But one district sending a gift to another district was completely unprecedented. The capital didn't want anyone directly related to the games to be able to use this gambling system, because that would lead to corruption, and they didn't want to make the Hunger Games unethical. The peacekeepers who were assigned to guard the tributes, the Gamemakers, the mentors, or any one of the family members of anyone that I just mentioned are not allowed to place bets. As you can probably guess right now, the more sponsors that a tribute has, the better off they're gonna be. The gifts that can be sent into the games vary from healing medications, loaves of bread, tools, soup, a tap for water, and so on. In the books, Katniss goes on to explain that gifts go up in price the longer the games go on. What buys you a full meal on day 1 buys you a measly cracker on day 12, which is why Haymitch has to pull everyone together right here so that he could send Katniss that healing cream in the 74th Hunger Games. And stuff like that is a premium item from the start, so multiple sponsors had to get together in order to send her that. The mentor actually controls when to send in the gifts, as the gifts should really only be sent into the games when the tribute absolutely needs it and has no other option left. Like in the 74th Hunger Games, Katniss was extremely dehydrated, but Haymitch chose not to send in water because she was nearing a water source. The tributes need to indulge in this week of pageantry and ceremony because the more likable they are, the more sponsors they get, meaning that the right mentor is very important, as previously mentioned. So when Haymitch says,
"And know in your heart that there's nothing I can do to save you,"
it didn't really make Katniss or Peeta feel better about their situation. Like, it didn't help at all. To be fair, Haymitch was just broken down over time. For starters, after he won the 50th Hunger Games, Snow had his girlfriend, his mother, and his brother killed for misconstruing Haymitch being Haymitch as an act of defiance against the capital. And when he so eloquently told Catnip and Peeta Bread
that there's nothing I can do to save you,
it's not him trying to scare them or taunt them. He was more just venting above all else. Haymitch was one of the only 2 victors from District 12 in the first 73 years of the Hunger Games. It was just him and Lucy. So in the past, he tried to help his tributes and became emotionally attached, but then it would always lead to the same outcome. He would watch them die in the games. So when he claims that it's taxing stuff,
this mentoring is very taxing stuff.
He's less talking about the fact that being a mentor is hard work, but more about the emotional toll behind it. He wants to give them advice to survive, but he's come to the realization that the odds are never going to be in their favor. So in his mind, any amount of advice he gives is just, it's pointless because it's not going to help them. Think of it this way. He started mentoring the year after he won the 50th Hunger Games, meaning he's mentored and failed at keeping alive 44 tributes, which is why he resorts to drinking as a way to cope with all this nonsense. But Katniss and Peeta kind of gave him a little hope again, so I love this subtle moment right before the games where he refuses to drink, in order to keep his mind clear, so that he can help Peeta and Katniss in the best way he can. Great, now that we know a little bit more about Haymitch's tragic backstory, On to the second day, which is the tribute parade. This is the first chance they have at getting sponsors, as the capital citizens are seeing the tributes for the very first time in person. After getting off the train, each tribute is hosed down and made ready to be handed over to the stylist. This stylist is going to be in charge of their wardrobe from the start of the week till the end of it, starting with the parade. The tribute parade opening ceremonies, where tributes ride out in these horse-drawn chariots, typically dressed up in clothing that represents the industry of their district. So every year, District 12 would be coal miners. Haymitch was actually a coal miner during his parade, but that was until Cinna came in and just shook everything up, making Peeta and Katniss actual pieces of coal. The parade begins at the stables where the original tributes were stored in, and then it ends at the city circle, where President Snow will give the opening address. The tributes are then escorted to the training center, where they will be staying until the game starts. This training complex was traded for a much bigger place during the 75th Hunger Games, but that's the year that like everything was overdone, because it was the Quarter Quell. So let's just go back to the OG training center that they used for the 74th, and the years before that. This building had 12 floors in it, and they divided it up by districts. So District 1 will be the first floor, District 2 is going to be the second floor, and can you guess what District 3 is going to get? District 12 kind of benefits here because they get the penthouse. Even though District 12 is the most forgotten and underappreciated district, like, I can't emphasize how much no one cares about District 12. Regardless of what floor the tributes are on, they're given the same luxury that they were given on the train car and are waited on by Avoxes, servants who were traitors to the capital and had their tongues cut out. The tributes spend their day in the training centers and nights resetting in the tower. During this time, the mentor gives the two tributes an option to train together or to train separately. They can choose to train separately because they may not want to reveal their special skill to the other tribute from their district. With Katniss, her secret skill was archery, but Peeta already knew that. And Katniss knew his secret of being able to like lift a really heavy bag of flour, so they both decided to train together. By the way, the only reason Peeta shows off how much weight he can throttle at non-moving objects is so he doesn't appear weak, letting other players know that he's not going to be an easy target to pick off once the games begin. At the training facility when training the other tributes, they set up stations with skilled professionals who are on standby to instruct you on the proper techniques of how to master a particular skill. These stations include knot tying, camouflage, hand-to-hand combat, spear throwing, throwing knives, and really just a lot of throwing things. Fishing, learning what plants are edible or not edible. That one's really important.
That's Nightlock, Peeta!
Constructing shelters, starting fires, and the list just keeps going. Over the next few training days, the Gamemakers mostly ignore the tributes as they sit up here just indulging themselves with a bunch of food, but they will have the occasional glance over to observe certain tributes. And when they do take a microsecond out of their very busy day to look over at a tribute, they'll take notes on where they excel and where they don't. It's important to note that the tributes are forbidden to fight with each other before the game starts, you know, because that would just be bad manners. Career tributes are the real tributes to look out for, as they are well trained and better fed. And if you get a chance, you should definitely make them your ally. Like, everyone's giving Peeta so much shade for befriending Cato and friends, but he did make the right decision, otherwise he would be donezo. Oh yeah, speaking of which, the games allow for alliances, so you should either pair up with the really smart ones or the tank. When Haymitch sees Cato right here, he's rocking this concerned expression on his face because he's reminded of the District 1 career that almost annihilated him back in the day. So from Haymitch's time in the games, he knows that career tributes are nothing to mess with. As mentioned earlier, tributes from District 1 and District 2 usually have the best odds. In fact, in the 74th Hunger Games, you can see their odds in the wager hall right here. One of the District 2 tributes has 3-to-1 odds, while other tributes have 30-to-1 odds. And Katniss even started with 23-to-1. At the end of the 3 days of training, we go to the evaluation, where the Gamemakers can further ignore the tributes. The evaluation is a private session with just the lone tribute and all these Gamemakers right here. No one from the public, not even the citizens of the capital, are able to view the evaluation. This has to do with the whole hiding your skills from the rest of the tributes sort of thing, as Katniss only shows off her archery during this time. The only thing that the public gets to see is the tribute receiving rating between 1 through 12. You know, after the 12 districts. Not District 13 though, because we don't talk about District 13. Allegedly, the rating system doesn't guarantee if someone's gonna win the games or not. It's just a good reference point. However, who performs best in the evaluation often determines who has the most potential in the arena. This is very important for getting things like, what's it called again? Oh yeah, sponsors. So there is some correlation there. You can tell just how important the evaluation is because mentors like Haymitch choose to stop drinking while taking their tributes through the process. Oh, by the way, during the evaluation, tributes are supposed to be dismissed by the Gamemakers. So when Katniss decides to excuse herself after shooting an apple next to the head Gamemaker's head, she was really just adding insult to injury. But don't worry, they put up one of those electromagnetic shields after Katniss shot an arrow. So the Gamemakers are safe. You don't have to worry about the safety of the Gamemakers anymore. It's interesting how there wasn't a shield there beforehand, given how many weapons are in that training facility. But I guess no one out of the like 1800 plus tributes before Katniss had the audacious idea to fire an arrow at a Gamemaker. At the end of the week, the last stop in this hellscape is the personal interview for each tribute. They dress to the nines and oh wait. Hold on. I actually forgot to mention the Quarter Quell. The Quarter Quell is another way the Capitol puts everyone in their place by reminding them that they're at the Capitol's mercy and to not pull another uprising. In the laws that were laid out a while ago, like at the creation of the Hunger Games, they dictated that every 25 years, the Quarter Quell would happen. It's basically the anniversary edition of the Hunger Games. During this time, they're gonna deliver a higher level of elaborateness during the games, as well as provide way more luxury, on top of the already luxurious experience that all the tributes get, like upgrading the training center and the rooms that they stay in. But if you're not one for the finer things, that's cool, because the main draw of the Quarter Quell would be the twist, something that's going to make the games a lot harder. These twists were stored in these well-hidden boxes at the Capitol, so each Quarter Quell was planned out from the beginning. Okay, so we've only seen like 3 Quarter Quells so far, and it appears that the founding members of the Hunger Games created 80 boxes, meaning they planned out Quarter Quells for like 2,000 years. I bet the shelf of boxes keeps going, but the frame is sadly cutting it off. So in my opinion, there's probably a lot more boxes, and there's a lot more Quarter Quells that we're even aware of. On the 25th anniversary, the Quarter Quell twist served as a reminder to the rebels that their children were dying because of their choice to initiate violence. So every district was made to hold an election and vote on who would represent it. So like everyone had to vote on which tribute they would be sending in. I hate that we haven't seen or heard anything from the 25th because that is a real ethical dilemma right there. Like, do you send in the strongest kid or do you send in the kid that just nobody likes? On the 50th anniversary, also known as the year that Haymitch was in the games, as a reminder that 2 rebels died for every capital citizen during the war, every district was required to send in twice as many tributes. On the 75th anniversary, because you know, why not? The male and the female tributes would be reaped from the remaining pool of victors. However, this wasn't really what the founders wanted for the 75th. Plutarch Evansby actually ended up burning the envelope that contained the twist to the 75th, and then replacing it with his own. The whole forcing other victors to be part of the Hunger Games was part of his plan to get half the tributes on the side of protecting Peeta and Katniss, so that originally Peeta, but mainly Katniss, could serve as the symbol for the rebellion and start that new uprising. By the way, my favorite hint that Plutarch Evansby was trying to keep Katniss alive was how, being the head game maker, he was responsible for every detail in the games. So it's no coincidence that they placed Katniss's weapon of choice right in front of her plate when the game started. But enough about classic mutiny compromising the state of the Capitol. We finally arrived. The games. It only took us like 20 minutes. When first creating this punishment, the Hunger Games was kind of boring. Because like I said before, they would just throw the tributes into the arena and just give them like a bunch of weapons that were like stockpiled in the middle of the amphitheater. It was kind of like the Hunger Games we have right now, but way more simple. It was very small scale and it was not entertaining. I mean, it took place in a dilapidated amphitheater that was damaged during the war. The dilapidated sports and entertainment complex was also used for the first 9 years of the Hunger Games, so it was getting pretty stale at this point. Nowadays, when people from the defeated districts watch the games, they do it on old TVs that barely work, or they gather in the town square to watch it together on this really big clear screen. Each tribute is transported to the newly constructed arena by hovercraft. In the 74th Hunger Games, it took the hovercraft 30 minutes to transport the tributes from the training center to the new arena. Each tribute is given a tracker, you know, to further dehumanize them. Then they're led into the catacombs beneath the arena, where they go into their own launch room, or how the people in the districts refer to it as, the stockyard. Before the game starts, the tributes are all going to be given the same kind of outfits. In the 74th Hunger Games, they were given jackets that were designed to reflect heat to keep the body cool during the day, but also insulated enough to keep the body warm during the cool nights. In the 75th Hunger Games, the tributes were given wetsuits, and the wetsuits were pretty cool because they had removable arm sleeves, just in case, you know, you wanted to remove the arm sleeves. The stylist does not have a say, or even knows what kind of clothing their tribute's going to be wearing in the arena. In the books, each tribute is allowed one token in the arena. However, one year, a girl from District 1 tried sneaking in a ring that if you twist the gemstone on it, it would reveal a poison spike. So they had to develop another review board on top of the many review boards, reviewing what tokens would be allowed in the arena, because most of the other tributes out here are trying to disguise weapons as sentimental objects. In the stockyard, or sorry, the launch room, the tribute has to step into this glass cylinder and rise for 15 seconds before the metal plate below their feet reaches the surface. Once they reach the surface, a 60-second countdown begins till the games officially start. But don't step off the platform if the countdown is not over. Just don't do it. Like, don't. Because if you step off the platform before the countdown is over, it's gonna blow up. Because the game makers conveniently placed landmines beneath the plate that you're standing on. Tragic stories. So one year, this one girl dropped a wooden ball that was her token, and the weight distribution from dropping this small wooden ball ended up triggering the mine below her plate, thus giving her a trip to the sky. I guess she really dropped the ball on that one. Another reason, on top of the many reasons as to why the token review board is very important. In the movie version of the 74th Hunger Games, it appears that the Mockingjay pen that Cinna attached to Katniss's outfit was not approved by this review board. When the 60-second countdown stops, you can safely step into the death pit. Once you're off the plate, you can play it safe by running as fast as humanly possible into the woods, or if you're feeling a little dangerous, you can go straight to the Cornucopia, also known as the Horn of Plenty, representing abundance and nourishment. During the 74th and the 75th Hunger Games, they made the Cornucopia 20 feet high in the style of brutalist architecture. Throughout the years, from like the 10th Hunger Games to now, the game makers stuck with the tradition of plopping all the weapons in the center of the arena. But don't get me wrong, they added a lot more stuff. The Cornucopia is a place where you can find knives, swords, bows and arrows, spears, body armor, like the kind the guards wear, night vision sunglasses, water bottles, even more weapons, packs of dried fruit, and basically a large stockpile of food. The further into the horn you go, the better supplies you're gonna find, like a really rad looking sword or a tent that can handle any weather condition. Some mentors are gonna advise most mentors are gonna advise their tributes to just stay away from the Cornucopia because it's gonna be a quote-unquote bloodbath, as this is on average where most of the kills happen, because the career tributes are gonna claim this area for their own, as they're gonna hoard all that food that I was talking about. Speaking of the bloodbath surprisingly brings a lot of unaliveness. Every time a tribute falls, you will hear a boom of the cannon. During the bloodbath at the Cornucopia, there are so many kills that happen there that they actually delay the cannons. Then later that night, the anthem of Panem plays over the speakers that are placed somewhere in here, and the seal of the capital is projected into the sky, followed by pictures of today's fallen tributes. The list of the fallen tributes goes in order of districts. So if no tributes died from districts 1 or 2, they would start with the fallen tribute from district 3. And if no one dies in general, they'll just play the anthem and then show the emblem of the capital. It's not really that interesting. In fact, I kind of debated writing that out of the video. Once a tribute is no longer alive, a hovercraft will come into the arena and scoop them up. And then they're going to ship that corpse back to their home district. The reason why they show pictures and not footage of the tribute falling is so they don't reveal somebody's special skill or strategy. So knowing that, let's say you're a tribute who just entered the games. Whether or not you're at the Cornucopia, or lying on the ground no longer living, or running for your life in the middle of the woods from other tributes, I think think it's going to be a good time to take note of your surroundings. Mostly how you're in a dome that's designed by Gamemakers who exist solely to make your stay here an absolute nightmare in the most entertaining way possible. It's going to be a little unnerving too because everything feels real, but it lacks any authenticity. In the books, Katniss even mentions that the moon in the sky doesn't even look like our moon. But don't worry, the camera's being placed anywhere and everywhere, all the way from the sky to inside of the trees, recording your every single move and broadcasting it to all of Panem, so your friends, family, and everyone that you've ever met in your entire life can watch you in these games. That fact should probably make you feel a little bit more at ease. So if you're Katniss Everdeen and you find yourself in the middle of the woods, you can relax for a little bit, because you have a better understanding of the land than any of the other tributes. The reason Katniss and everyone else would be worried about the terrain is because no one has any idea what the layout of the arena is going to be until they're seeing it after ascending out of that glass tube. I mean, the arena could be anything, from a burning desert to a frozen wasteland. In the past, they had swamplands, a place with a whole heck of a lot of boulders, an arena with too many scruffy bushes, or even the ruined city. If they do the wasteland or desert, they tend to add stuff like trees, inclines, or other obstacles, because the games end pretty quickly if there's no cover. Making the games kind of sounds a little complicated, but this is where the game makers come in. They're like people who make reality TV shows, except they're slightly more ethical. Their job is challenging, but also very dangerous, because if you don't do a good job, you may pay for that with your life. Take Seneca Crane, for example. After Katniss and Peeta pulled their little stunt at the end of the 74th Hunger Games and had the audacious idea of surviving, Crane was locked in a room and forced to eat the same kind of poisonous berries that the two remaining tributes were gonna eat. One year, I don't know which Hunger Games this was exactly, but about half the tributes died in the cold, and there was barely any fighting. It was just a bunch of tributes freezing. As Gale would put it, there's not much entertainment in that. So you can tell that the head game maker that year definitely got in some big trouble. During the 50th Hunger Games, the arena was apparently the most breathtaking place imaginable, which makes sense because it was the Quarter Quell. And by now, we know how much the capital goes all out for the Quarter Quell. Like, look at this breathtaking tropical arena that they used for the 75th, or the place that the victors were staying at during the 75th. I don't know a lot of information about the 25th, so just don't ask me about it. But going back to the 50th anniversary, in this breathtaking arena, at the center of this vast meadow filled with gorgeous flowers, there was a massive golden cornucopia, and this was accompanied with a blue sky that was littered with puffy white clouds, and the whole place smelled amazing. In fact, the place was so overwhelming with its beauty and appearance and all that, that some of the tributes actually ended up staying on their plates after the countdown ended, giving more time for tributes like Haymitch to run to the cornucopia, grab a backpack, and get the heck out of there. But here's the kicker. Everything in this arena, and I mean everything, was poisonous. All of this delicious looking fruit, poisonous. The water flowing in the crystalline stream, poisonous. The amazing smelling flowers, if you get a little bit too close, poisonous. The only thing that you could drink would be the rainwater, and the only thing that you could eat would be the food that was already placed at the cornucopia. And of course, certain sections of this arena, along with every other arena and any of the other Hunger Games after the 10th, were rigged with traps. In the 74th Hunger Games, for example, it's hard to tell where the traps were really located. However, in the 75th Hunger Games, the traps were divided up into 12 sections, making up the Clock of Doom. Each hour on the Clock of Doom was dedicated to a very not pleasant trap. The 12 to 1 o'clock zone is the place where the lightning happens. 1 to 2 o'clock zone belongs to the blood rain. They caught blood rain that is actually blinding, and if you try to speak, you get a mouthful of it. One player got caught in the rain and lost all awareness of their surroundings, and then they ended up accidentally running into that force field that's surrounding the arena. The 2 to 3 o'clock zone is the poisonous fog. If it comes in contact with any part of your body, it's gonna leave extremely painful scabs, and the longer you're exposed to it, the more it's gonna immobilize you, and then it's gonna eventually kill you. 3 to 4 o'clock zone, it belongs to the super terrifying monkeys. 4 to 5 o'clock zone is the Jabberjays, where they repeat your biggest fears, mainly your loved ones screaming out for help. 5 to 6 o'clock zone is unknown. The 6 to 7 o'clock zone is freaky. Apparently there's a massive mutt in there that no one knows the appearance of. Like, no one's seen it, but they assume it's like a Bigfoot type of creature, as tributes have reported that it ripped one of the other players' bodies into pieces. When it comes to the 7 to 8 o'clock zone, the 8 to 9 o'clock zone, and the 9 to 10 o'clock zone, no one knows what's in there because the main characters didn't explore those areas, and because the author didn't write them in the books, and because the filmmakers didn't add it to the film. The 10 to 11 o'clock zone is a massive sea wave that starts all the way in the back where the force field is, and then ends at the Cornucopia. 11 to 12 o'clock zone is not my favorite because Katniss and Finnick are suspecting that this area is filled with a bunch of giant insects, as it's filled with very distinct clicking sounds. Katniss assumed that maybe there's large beetles in there with pincers that are big enough and strong enough to rip the flesh off your bones. One of my favorite details about the IMAX version of Catching Fire that I haven't gotten over yet has to be the fact that the aspect ratio changes when Katniss rises into the arena. It starts with the black bars when she's in the stockyard, and then by the time she's seeing the arena for the first time, the black bars completely disappear. The extra space on the screen really does add to the beauty and the scale of everything, and gives us a better perspective as to what the tributes from the 50th anniversary were experiencing. And speaking of the 50th Hunger Games, remember that big old beautiful mountain that I was talking about? This puppy ended up being a massive volcano, then ends up erupting. Yeah, it was a trap the entire time. During the eruption, it ended up wiping out 12 tributes with liquid hot magma. Honestly, the poisonous flowers, the hunger, the dehydration, and the scruffy bushes are going to be the least of your worries when it comes to the animals. The Capitol created genetically modified animals called mutations, or mutts for short. These lab-grown creatures could be something like the jabberjays, a bird that has parrot-like qualities and can repeat human vocals. These birds were trained by the Capitol to listen into enemy conversations and then fly back and then repeat exactly what they were saying. However, they discontinued this mutt after the rebels caught on to what the Capitol was doing, and then they started sending back the jabberjays with false information. The jabberjays ended up mating with female mockingbirds, creating a brand new species called the Mockingjay. This new species of the Mockingjay does not enunciate words like the jabberjay, but it repeats whistles and human melodies. And the Mockingjay has the ability to recreate songs with multiple verses, making it the ultimate songbird. But not every mutt is as non-threatening as the jabberjays. Take the iconic lethal tracker jackers, for example.
I think those are tracker jackers. Am I wrong?
One sting from these genetically modified danger wasps can and will cause a hallucination cycle, showing you different variations of your worst fears, and then at one point it's going to convince you that you're awake and it's over, only to bring you back into another poison-fueled fever dream. Their sting can take a life, and the hallucinations can be so intense that it can actually drive you insane. The tracker jackers helped win the war for the Capitol, but after the war was over, the Capitol removed all the nests surrounding their city. However, the nests that they planted in the 12 districts, they left those up. Since there was no war going on, Dr. Volumnia Gull and other scientists, but mainly Gull, were desperate to start seeing their creations in action again. Thankfully, the Hunger Games gave Gull a new place to test her experiments. In the arena, you can encounter a plethora of awful mutts. You may face rabbits with the jaw strength of a pit bull, or reanimated bodies of fallen tributes that were turned into vicious hounds with numbered collars on them representing what district they're from and who they were before getting mutated. That's what the wolves right here were originally supposed to be. Yeah, I'm kind of glad that they didn't do that for the cinematic version of the story. Dr. Volumnia Gulls bred some of these snakes that you see right here, doing this for Hunger Games 10. These are artificially bright snakelets that glow in shades of neon pink, blue, and yellow. In the book, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, it's said that the snakelets are no longer than a ruler and not much thicker than a pencil, but they clearly increased their size for the film. These snakes, like most snakes, smell with their tongues, and when they're fully grown, they can outrun a human, which is really convenient because they're designed to hunt humans and reproduce rapidly. But when hunting us humans, they have this bite containing lethal venom. But you don't have to worry about that because there's an anti-venom for it, unless you can't get to an anti-venom vial. But going back to the tongue thing, when Dr. Volumnia Gull first introduced Snow to these snakes, she dropped this one paper that Snow supposedly wrote with his other classmates into the container. For those wondering, the paper was part of the whole Hunger Games proposal project. Anyway, Gull believed that Snow was the only one who worked on it, and after dropping it in the snake den, the vivid psychedelic death tubes that you see right here, the snakes became familiar with Snow's scent because he was the one writing the paper and rubbing all his scent on the paper. So they want to attack Snow. They will, however, attack Snow's classmate, Clemencia, who tried taking credit for said paper, prompting her to stick her hand in the tank to retrieve it, thus landing her in the hospital. Snow ended up actually becoming one of the first cheaters of the Hunger Games by dropping a handkerchief with his tribute sent into the snake pit. This ended up saving Lucy Gray's life, as they didn't attack her in the arena, because like how they became familiar with Snow's scent, the snakes became familiar with Lucy's scent. In the arena of the 75th Hunger Games, Katniss describes seeing strange birds with brilliant plumage, tree lizards with flickering blue tongues, and something that looks like a cross between a giant rat and a possum clinging onto the branches of a tree. These creatures don't sound that threatening except for the last one, but knowing the games, they probably are, because not long after Katniss sees those, she runs into these massive mandrill monkey mutts that are given significantly more strength than a normal mandrill monkey, which is terrifying. During the 50th, when Haymitch was in the most beautiful arena imaginable, he encountered fluffy golden squirrels who were definitely not as inviting as the stealing food from your bird feeder kind of squirrels. No, these fluffy squirrels were carnivorous and they hunted in packs. Oh my gosh, and the butterflies. Let's just say the butterflies weren't as diplomatic as the butterfly that landed on Katniss in the 74th, because the butterflies in the 50th brought stings that could rival Tracker Jacker stings and bring pain beyond comprehension, as well as death. So when Haymitch was watching this moment in the 74th Hunger Games, I bet his heart skipped a beat for a second there, as he was probably screaming at Katniss to stay away from that very threatening creature. There was also a flock of candy pink birds. My unofficial name for these mutts would be nightmare flamingos, as they were equipped with these very long, thin beaks that skewered Macy Donner through the neck, thus killing Haymitch's one and only ally in the games. During the unofficial 76 Hunger Games, Snow sends in these monsters that are the same color as the white roses that he's constantly seen with. And apparently these mutts are rose scented. The lizard-like mutts are equipped with razor sharp talons and crazy strong jaws with razor sharp teeth. They have the ability to walk on all fours or run on all fours when they need more speed. And they also have these lovely shrieks. But they also somehow have the ability to say one word, and that would be the name Katniss. Like the snakes in the 10th Hunger Games, these rose-scented death machines rely less on vision and more on scent, as they ended up tracking Katniss' scent. So it looks like everything came full circle. There were also rats in the Capitol sewers that were the size of beavers, but those weren't mutts, those were just normal rats. So let's say it's getting boring. Well, if you're the head game maker, you better think quickly, because the president of Pan Am is watching and you don't want to get Seneca craned. But don't worry, we have a lot of strategies. Like if the tributes are straying too far from each other, you can create a firewall and then launch fireballs in their general direction to push them away from the edge of the arena and closer towards the other tributes. And for those wondering, the fireballs being launched at Katniss were coming from precision launchers that were concealed in trees and rocks. You, being the head game maker, can control the weather in order to get the tributes out of safety, like progressively ratcheting up the temperatures in the daytime and sending it plummeting at night. Since we're in a dome and everything's in our control, the temperature is not restricted to the time of day. So you can mess with the tributes by making it freezing cold even though the sun's out and beaming down on them. You can also make it start pouring rain like a tropical storm, or make the rain stop out of nowhere in an instant. And if that's not enough, you can completely drain the riverbeds or ponds. This will deplete the tributes of both food and water. And if you're really desperate to get some action happening, you can always have a feast. They'll have goofballs like Claudius Templesmith make announcements in the arena.
Stop! Stop!
Announcements are very rare and usually only happen when the game makers are pulling something like a feast or trying to prevent an uprising in District 11. I'm just gonna put it out there. The game makers are stupid. I love how they have this huge vault keeping the rules for the Quarter Quell safe, right? But then during the 74th Hunger Games, they proved that, you know, the rules are pretty much arbitrary, as they made the change to allow 2 victors as long as they're from the same district. And then they later went back on that rule, revoking it, because apparently they more closely examined the rule book and found that they couldn't do that, and came to the bright conclusion that there could only be one winner. And I'm over here like, okay, well, 1, clearly you're lying, and then 2, Are you that incapable of doing your job? Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is that the rules only change to benefit the capital. But going back to the feast, the tributes will hear the sound of trumpets, alerting everyone who's still alive to listen up, because they're announcing that there's going to be a feast. Traditionally, the feast happens at the Cornucopia, typically later in the games. Actually, typically towards the end of the games, when the game makers think that there's few opponents left and everything's just getting really boring. Feasts almost always result in fatalities. So when they call for a feast, they're basically calling for a bloodbath part 2. The feasts are meant to lure the tributes out of safety by placing the most crucial items that each remaining tribute needs next to the Cornucopia. For example, some years they're gonna have the players fight over a stale loaf of bread. In the 74th Hunger Games, the bags that were left at the Cornucopia were marked for each district. The something special in Katniss's bag was medicine for PETA. In the books, the bags were different colors and sizes. Like out of the 4 bags, there were 2 large black backpacks for districts 2 and 11, a medium-sized green backpack for district 5, and then there was a tiny orange bag for district 12, which was small enough to carry around your wrist. But in the movie, they went with all the packages looking the same and lacking any color variation. I don't know why anyone needed to know that part of the lore. The feast is such an important event that they're most likely going to cancel school over it. It's been around since the early Hunger Games, but the only time we've really seen a feast was during the 74th. The only reason we didn't see a feast during the 75th was because Katniss decided to do the whole, I'm gonna wrap a metal cable around my arrow and then shoot it at the roof of the stadium, thus blowing everything up and sparking an uprising kind of thing. Okay, so in this new scenario, you're no longer a game maker, but a rebel fighting against Snow, which is going pretty well because you're closing in on the capital. When traversing this land of nightclubs, tacky clothes, and pink dogs, the one thing that you should be on the lookout for is the pods. The pods are the things responsible for the unofficial 76 Hunger Games.
Welcome to the 76 Hunger Games.
Also known as the defense of the capital or the battle of the capital, whichever you prefer. As your rebel army is closing in on Snow's mansion, Snow decided to show your invasion on television, the same way that they would broadcast the actual Hunger Games. The president had the remaining game makers spread out these pods across the capital. These pods could contain anything from explosives to mutts, and apparently some of these pods have been in place since the dark days, and others have been developed over the years. Some of these pods that you may accidentally bump into are not going to be pleasant, as they can consist of scary lizard humanoids that smell really good, lights that could vaporize you, a floor that turns into blades, flamethrowers, turrets that need to calm down a little bit, a wave of tar, net traps within that wave of tar, flesh-eating rats, swarms of gnat mutts, and so on. If your fellow victors or high-level soldiers fall in the arena of the capital, their images will be broadcasted the same way that they broadcast the images of fallen tributes in the arena of every single other Hunger Games. And let's say you pulled a Haymitch, or Lucy, or Finnick, or Katniss, or PETA, and you've won. You've won the freaking Hunger Games. Out of the 24 tributes pinned against each other, you are the sole victor. It's over. You're done. You can stop worrying. Just kidding. This train ride does not end. The capital is going to keep the winning tributes in these high-end hospital rooms for a few days to make sure that they are presentable before presenting them to Panem. This is where their wounds are treated, scars are eliminated, hearing is returned, then basically everything is fixed. And on top of that, they're well fed and well hydrated. Then when you're actually presentable, but hopefully not too presentable, because if you're a victor who's considered desirable, the president gives you to someone as a reward or lets someone from the capital buy you. And if you refuse, they kill everyone you love. But don't worry about that yet, because first thing you gotta do is the crowning ceremony with President Snow and a fun 3-hour recap of the games that all of Panem is forced to watch. But don't worry, they're gonna cut out unimportant things that totally don't compromise the capital's control, like Katniss covering Rue with flowers after her death. The biggest cut in Hunger Games history would have to be the 10th Hunger Games. There's no way to know what went down during the 10th Hunger Games other than hearing about it from people who viewed the original broadcast, because all of the recordings of it have been deleted. Actually, that's not true. Dr. Volumnia Gull has the only copy of the 10th Hunger Games. Anyway, you being a victor, you'll be paired up with another victor from your district. Having a partner gives you someone to play off of while doing the interviews. This is almost essential because it's customary for the victor and their support team to go on tour to the other districts to remind everyone how important and just great the games are.
Panem today, Panem tomorrow.
Your district, the winning district, will be showered with prizes consisting of food, and mainly food. Surprisingly, the Hunger Games is mainly about food. During his Game Maker internship, Snow thought it would be beneficial to have the food be given to the entire winning district in order to encourage the districts to put forth a better class of tribute. Snow also implemented a token monetary prize to each victor in hopes of bringing out more performers like Lucy Gray. You being the hero of your district, you're gonna live out the rest of your days in Victor's Village, another idea that was conceived by Snow during his internship. Every district is gonna have a Victor's Village, and within it are a few dozen homes that are constructed for the victors, like only for the victors, so they can live out their days in luxury and happiness, and clearly they're not going to be miserable at all. Meanwhile, the arena that you just fought in is going to be considered a historical site, as each arena is going to be preserved after the games, meaning the launch rooms like the one Katniss and Cinna are standing in right here would be the one and only time this room would ever be used. The historical sites are where people from the capital, or sorry, citizens of the capital will vacation, eat a bunch of food, and join in reenactments of the games. It's really up. So on that dour note, that's the guide to the Hunger Games.